Good evening, my name is Helen Anthony. I'm a councilwoman for Ward 2 and the chair of the Committee on Finance. I'm calling to order our regular meeting on Thursday, May 25th, 2023 at 5:35 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Chairwoman Helen B. Anthony,
Present.
Vice Chairman Juan Pichardo,
Present.
Councilman James Taylor is absent, Councilor Sue Engelbart, present, Councilor Miguel Sanchez.
Here.
We have 4 present, 1 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. And tonight I would like to recognize Councilor Vargas. We have Councilor Peterson. We have our assistant senior deputy, whatever. City solicitor.
It can change all
Yeah, so it's me. We are clerks, Julie, and we have the auditor. Costa. So thank you all, and we will start with agenda item 1. Will you please read it in the record? Mr. Record.
Item number 1, communication from His Honor the Mayor dated April 17, 2023, informing the honorable members of the City Council that pursuant to sections 302B and 1008 of the Providence Home Rule Charter of 1980, has amended and public law, chapter 45-50, sections 1 through 31, passed in 1987, he is this day appointing James C. Moore III of 23 Township Trail, Cranston, Rhode Island, 02921, as Director of the Department of Inspection and Standards, and respectfully submits the same for your approval.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, welcome. Nice to see you. If you stay standing, we'll swear you in. And then we will start with this.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and help you God?
I do.
And please state your name for the record.
And for the record, James Chester, Moore III.
Have a seat. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, it's very nice to have you here this evening. And if you could just start by giving just a brief overview of your background.
My background is primarily in building inspection. I went to school for building inspection after a military stint, and then started with out in Colorado, and then moved to the city of Portland. Spent some time there. Economy took its turn. Everyone learned from that one. And then I landed in Spokane County after deployment with the Army. Spent 9 years there. And then my wife said, before we got married, that if a job came open, and well, we were moving back here no matter what. She's from New Bedford, and so I said, okay. So that's how I'm here.
And can you just, again, just a little more detail about what makes you qualified for this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, because we
So-
need that for also.
Spokane County, I started as a plans examiner, moved my way up to director. Jurisdiction is 1,700 square miles, 500,000 people. And I was the director of basically their inspection and standards. I had an operating budget of 5.9 million. It was an enterprise budget, so it was my budget. I ran the budget myself. So I tracked every dollar. Basically, it was a cost recovery program, so every year I had to have a balanced budget with 10% on top. So that's my qualifications as far on the business side. On the technical side, I'm a certified plans examiner, fire inspector, fire marshal, building official, mechanical inspector. I can say that when I got certified, there was only 4 certifications at the beginning in 1999. And so I've spent the last almost 20 years. Just
Also, did you talk about your military background? Did you mention that?
I did.
How does that influence your work?
Accountability. I don't, number one, it has to be efficient. Everything has to be efficient. Everything we do needs to be efficient. If it's not efficient, then we need to find ways to make it efficient. And so I take that military background, and as I'm walking through, my day, as I'm walking with my employees, as we're talking about something, I'm analyzing everything that they're talking about to see how I can make their duty more efficient, their job more efficient. Why? Because that means I'm taking away the outliers, I'm taking away the ability for mistakes, because that's when the cities get sued or counties get sued, is by mistakes. So you take that piece off of there, it lowers the pressure on the employee because everything's automated as far as the system. And then they're allowed to provide the customer service, answer the phone, call people back. And so that's my primary piece. And you do that with accountability. You hold everyone to a standard, whatever that standard is, and you make sure they understand the expectations. Once they understand the expectations, then you can move forward. Then you loop back around and have the conversations, the tough ones if you have to. You treat everyone with the same respect, no matter their job position, their title. Everyone gets the same respect, and they're all held to the same accountable standard. So that's my military background. That's what I bring from my military background.
Thank you. And without going, I'll just ask one more question and open it up. But without getting into too many details, because we are going to go in great detail over your department budget. But since you've been here, what has been your primary focus with the department?
With the department, compliance instruction. It's things that that they've needed to work on as far as prior. It needs a little bit of a restructuring, and the focus needs to be on the citizens. Yes, we serve the public. That's what our job is. Our job is to put people in safe homes. Our job is to keep people in safe homes. How do we do that? We got to respond, and we got to enforce the laws and rules because they're in place. So that's, in 4 weeks, I sat and listened, and I pulled everyone together, and I said, it's been 30 days, now I own it. And this week I've shipped out 6 policies, 4, one more came this morning, we're going paperless. So everything's created digitally. Why don't we review it and issue it digitally? So those are the things I'm working on.
Okay. Great. All right, committee members.
Madam Chair, just for clarity, this is just on Mr. Moore's appointment that is going to come back up to speak about the department.
That's correct. So any questions you have on the department budget, let's save for when he comes, just going to be coming right back up. But if you have, we're just having to pass our recommendation on this appointment.
Right.
As director. So if you have any questions on his qualifications or anything like that, if you want to know more specifics, otherwise, he's going to be back up to talk in detail about it. Yes, Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. Definitely sounds like you have the qualifications to be doing the job with your experience. My only question, really, you talked about the department. It sounds like a county you supervised.
Correct.
How many staff were you in charge of?
42 on the high end. Then we went through a restructure with the new CEO, and I went down to 31.
So just for like clarity and understanding, so Rhode Island is one of 2 states, I believe, that doesn't have county governments. How was the experience working with municipalities, and how do you think it's going to be different being just in charge of municipality and not having the county level of government here in Rhode Island?
So the county level that I worked at, we took care of the unincorporated areas. So the city of Spokane, the city of Spokane Valley, Mill Creek, Medical Lake, Deer Park, Cheney, those were incorporated areas inside my county. I didn't touch those. I touched everything outside of their incorporated area. So it was due to urban growth boundary. So everything outside of that was mine. Everything inside belonged to those jurisdictions specifically. The way I look at it is it's a jurisdiction. So whatever size, shape, it's a jurisdiction. And they come with the same problems sometimes. And so what you have to do is you have to find the flavor of the area and get it addressed that way.
Right.
This jurisdiction has 15 wards, I believe.
Mhm.
And with that, each area has its flavor. So you got to figure out what the needs are for each area, get that addressed. But if you address it this way, you can put in place the same tools to use over here.
Right. Follow-up question. So it sounds like most of your experience was in not like urban communities, more like rural, smaller towns, or?
No, the way the city annexed and adopted was based off of stores. So the city of Spokane, they would only annex grocery stores and stuff like that. They wouldn't annex subdivisions because there wasn't really a good base there. They didn't get the sales tax off of that. They got it off of the stores. So the property tax went to the county, but the sales tax, if they annexed it, it would go to the city. So we would have subdivisions, DR Horton, Viking, Hayden Homes, big developers would come in and buy up 50 acres and put in 200 homes. And so that's what we were working on.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Havergal.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman, and thank you so much. It looks like you have so many great qualifications. And when I was reading your resume, I was so excited. And you've also lived in some places that really likes. My father-in-law worked for Bloomfield, Colorado for a while, and I've always been fascinated by the like, anyway, unincorporated areas and, you know, having lived on the East Coast most of my life, we don't have that, so.
No, we do not.
I have two questions. One is, I really like that you brought up that, I think you said consistency is one of, or like the consistency, and you also brought up the 15 wards. My question is, so the background is I've been hearing that there's a fair amount of inconsistency in how the inspections are done across the wards. I'll share my ward, something I hear regularly is people get dinged for things like their paint's a little chipped or whatever. And then there's serious structural and safety issues in other wards that there's absolutely no compliance on. And not that people shouldn't have to, you know, pay for things that are broken, but also like people, we should be also people who's come health and safety issues, not just like, oh, you didn't update your paint. How are you, I'm hoping you're planning to bring some consistency, and how are you looking for issues like that in your department? Like, how are you looking to bring potentially some more consistency to how the inspections work?
So, like you said, for 4 weeks, I've been listening. Deputy Director Mahoney and I have talked. Director Thomas and I have talked, and I've talked to a couple council members. There needs to be a restructure. There also needs to be a refocus, and I think I bring that energy of the refocus and setting my priorities. So that's the start. The largest priority is number one, safety. That's my largest priority. One of the most shocking things I saw was a picture of a backed up sewer coming out of the house. And I said, why? My plumbing inspector told me why. And I said, then why are we visiting it again?
Yeah.
And so we need to take care of that. We need to, if this one was an out-of-state landlord, and I said, we need to apply pressure so that this never happens again. And so those are the things that we're working on, is avenues of applying pressure and how we get that done.
Awesome. Thank you. No, actually, I'm good. That was really complete. Thank you.
Okay, yes, Councilor Pichardo.
Thank you for your service, and what my colleagues have said. You spoke about restructuring and accountability, and also compliance. In your department now that you've spent 30 days or more now, right? Yeah.
36, 37.
How many employees are you're gonna be?
We got about 31.
31. And I guess this is part of the finance, but what are in terms of the employees, what was lacking? In terms of communication, in terms of, use of technology, And can you speak about, in essence, the strategy dealing with the housing stock here in New England, older homes,
Yep,
different neighborhoods having different quality of homes and so forth.
yes.
And can you just speak about that?
Yeah, so the one thing that I don't know how much has been done is leveraging the tools that we have. So Viewpoint, it provides a lot of information, but it's not sent to the public. I've worked with our IT staff and our GIS, and this morning they gave me the rough draft. There's gonna be a map out there that you'll be able to click on, and it will give you an updated view of the city with the parcels that have active compliance cases. So you'll be able to look at a parcel and say, oh, that one's lit up, so that one has an active compliance case. I'm gonna do that with building permits as well. So when the council members are driving around and they get somebody calling saying, what's going on this building? You click a map, you don't need to call anyone, you can see if there's a permit. If there's not a permit, you call me. And then, or you send me an email and we get someone out there. So what I want to do is I want to leverage that piece to move more response and get those notes in the computer. So that's the communication piece. So everyone that's answering a phone, everyone that's answering an email has the same information as the inspector on the ground. So that's my primary focus for communication. The notes in the computer aren't from me. I can put the notes in there. They're for you because you're gonna go back and look at it. Once I'm done with it, I'm done with it. But you're gonna want to know information on it. So that's my focus on the communication. As far as what they need, boundaries. That's what the team needs. They need set boundaries, operation, in my mind, they need operational boundaries on what we do and what we don't do. And they need a revitalization of understanding why they're here. They're not here for themselves as far as what they're getting out of the quote unquote deal. They're here, yeah, they gotta work, they love to eat, so they gotta work. But we're here for the people walking down the street. We're here for the person that's renting, the overpriced, but some of them are, single unit apartments. That's why we're here. So that's what I think we need to do, is get the people that work for me to understand that's why we're here. Now, some concerns are that if you call an inspector, you can't get a hold of them. I would say call me. And the reason why I say that is because I want them to understand they work for me. Yes, I report to you. At the end of the day, I report up a chain and you're at the end of the chain, or the people are. But if they understand they report directly to me, then they're gonna understand, okay, that's the boss. That's who I listen to. He might get directed from council, but he's the boss. And if we can set that, then they'll say every morning, morning boss, because they know that I'm not just gonna give them stuff to do I'm not gonna give them boondoggle jobs. I need them to do specific jobs for the city, not for themselves, for the city.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Providence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. James, welcome. Can you please explain how we going to have a different communication between the inspectors and the community?
Inspectors in the community.
Yeah, what will be the difference that you will do to communicate with the community outside when they go out and inspect?
So number one is respect. You talk to this person the same way you talk to this person. You've got to show them respect. So that's the one thing that I'm getting some tools for the inspectors to understand my expectations on how they treat the public. So that's number one. Number two, Deputy Director Mahoney, Director Thomas, we're looking at education programs that we can utilize the inspectors to work with contractors and have like short schools. Okay, if you have a contractor that's just starting up, they got their truck and they got, a couple bags of tools. They don't know code. So why don't we hold a short course? Hey, you're gonna build a deck, this is how you do it to code. This is how, and then that way we're not wasting time and money. Then what it does is it shows that we're friendly. No one wants to come to us. No one does. But if we make it so they want to come to us, because we're gonna give them the answer, that's gonna save them money, so they don't have to do something twice. Then they're gonna keep coming to us. They're gonna pull the permits because they're not gonna be afraid of us. And that's the other thing. We should not be that fear of, oh, if I call the inspector, they're gonna make us do X, Y, Z. No, it's always the same. It's written. It's black and white. It's written.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Because I got a little story, like, just got a phone call today, the inspector went by to cut a fence to lower down to 3 feet. Today, the precision got a phone call saying, look, you just got 3 days to cut it.
The inspector said you have 3 days to cut the fence down to 3 feet.
To 3 feet.
Can you send me an email?
I will work on it and we'll find out which was inspector, because that's not the right communication to go to the taxpayers and say, look, you only got 3 days to do it. Has to be a process better than that.
There should be more conversation. So send me an email and I'll look at the property and I'll get that taken care of. Sure.
Any other questions? Great with that. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
One was motion made by Councilor Sanchez, seconded by Councilor Pichardo. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? So we'll be speaking with you again. In just a few minutes.
Excellent.
Thank
Madam
you so
Chair.
much. Welcome. With that, I would like a motion to waive the reading of items number 2 through 5.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Councilor Amberbaum, seconded by Councilor Pichardo. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, so we are going to begin with our hearings and the director, so we are there. We'll do that. Welcome, thank you, Crystal. Nice to see you. All right. Okay, and so I think we will start with the Department of Planning and Development with Director Mulligan.
Raise your right hands. Do you swear on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And please state your names for the record.
Sarah Silver, Finance
Mr. Limber, Deputy Finance Director and Budget Officer.
Joe Mullen, Director of Planning and Development.
Housing and Community Development.
Robert Lazar, Deputy Director of Planning and Development. Dean Wesley, Deputy Director of Economic Opportunity.
Cassandra Thomas, Director of Economic Development.
Micah Salkind, Deputy Director of Horticulture and Tourism.
Kevin Mahoney, Deputy Director of Inspection Standards.
Sally Rideau, Director of Fiscal Operations and Development.
Okay, all right. So we have Director, Executive Director with us this evening. I have a motion to begin. We're going to mark the exhibit, the planning and development budget exhibit as number
27.
Second. Motion made by Councilor Pichardo, seconded by Councilor Amberbaum. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. How would you like to start?
However you prefer, we'd like the department to give an overview of what they do. and what
Yes,
they
we would. I
do.
think an overview would be all. Thank you.
Thank you for your time presented it. The Planning and Development Department primarily responsible for issues related to zoning, planning initiatives, particularly right now we begin to undertake a comprehensive plan for the city, which we're department is eagerly gearing up and organizing ourselves in order to launch that forward into the community. We work on redevelopment plans. We oversee design standards and design review of projects that are brought before the city. Try to promote high-quality public realm improvements, opportunities to enhance the civic realm. Working to strengthen our neighborhoods through strategic investments and policies. We engage our community in meaningful ways, including preserving historic properties and our heritage. We encourage a broad range of housing options and diverse job base. We work to effectively manage and implement many projects citywide, according to those goals.
Wonderful, thank you. Great, Director.
Okay, let's go through the financials. We're on page 43 in the budget book, if you're following along there. Planning and development is not a revenue generating department. Salaries for fiscal 24 are proposed $1,988,910. This is an increase of $43,179 over the 23 budget. And the department has requested the following organizational changes. They would like to fund the following positions, limited to grant funding or other funding sources with no impact to the budget. A project manager for $70,936, limited to grant funding. A PRA program manager for $70,936, limited to grant funding. And a PRA project manager for $70,936 to be reimbursed by the PRA. They'd like to move 2 positions out of Office of Economic Development, no general fund budget effect, the Director of Economic Development, and the confidential assistant to the Economic Development Director. Other changes, they would like to defund the Deputy Director of PRA at a savings of $41,605. Defund the Clerk 2 at a savings of $36,336. And increase the salary for the Director of Community Development from an A20 to an A22 at a cost of $2,666. The net savings is $75,275. And then subsequent to the budget, proposed budget submission, the department requests that the business research analyst and the Director of Communications positions move from the planning department to the Department of Economic Development at no cost to the operating budget. Moving on to benefits, total benefits for fiscal 24 are $1,449,518, an increase of $40,859. Total services for fiscal 24 are proposed at $587,819. This is an increase of $4,926 from the 23 budget, and that budget is primarily due to an increase in contractual rent expense. Moving on to supplies, total supplies for fiscal 24 are proposed $9,500, and an increase of $2,500 over the 23 budget for office supplies. And there is no capital expense in this department. Open it up to questions.
Great. Would any of my committee members like to have any questions?
Oh, I thought I was saying you want to,
Oh, I'm
but
sure. I will be happy to. Okay, the organizational chart, maybe you could just, it's changed, obviously, from the prior administration. So maybe you can talk to us about the change in the org chart.
Some of the changes include, I think, formalizing the relationship to the umbrella organization concept with Director Thomas being at the overseeing among her several departments, including this one. We've also just kind of for the planning staff, and at one point it was kind of bifurcated in terms of their roles and responsibilities to the oversight and review of zoning and permitting processes, and then another track that was involved in kind of broader future planning initiatives. And in anticipation of moving forward in the comprehensive plan and to simplify our organizational structure, have consolidated that the planning and development team into a more streamlined organization while maintaining everybody at their leadership or management status. So it's really just a way to consolidate and also what we've talked about move forward on the comprehensive plan, that there were members of the principal planning department that were kind of assigned to tasks that were didn't vary from their responsibility. The staff, I'm pleased to learn more about, are really very competent, capable professionals with a varied amount of interests. And as we move forward into a comprehensive planning strategy, I wanted to bring those skill sets to bear and not have people kind of pigeonholed into different responsibilities on the way to bring forward their talents and their desires and to work collaboratively and to bring their individual visions and talents to the whole as we move forward and find ways for them to contribute more fully to the overall planning and development initiatives as we move forward.
Great, thank you. And specifically, just on the neighborhood liaison, is that, I'm sorry, is that a new position?
It was an existing position that had been vacant, and we have put it out to secure an individual. In one of the criteria as we move forward with some bilingual skills to ensure that that candidate speaks Spanish, so that we can be more nimble and more responsive to the composition of the community and have our department also reflect the composition of the community as we move forward. And they will be instrumental in assisting our outreach activities and translation activities, as well as bringing their individual skill sets to the department as a whole.
Okay, and the other, under is director of real estate a new division?
No, that had been a vacant position that was recently filled. The candidate had been interviewed prior to my arrival. He was able to follow up, and we're happy to have that candidate in that position. It comes with a good amount of real estate experience and I think add some additional professionalism and a broader perspective to the roles and responsibilities of that department as well.
And what exactly is that, does that department do?
That's the Providence Development Agency.
Okay. I was wondering where the other is. Okay, thank you. And so that's, can you also run down that? So the project manager is unfilled, as is the chief clerk coordinator. Are those new positions or have they been vacant for a while?
No, they've been vacant for a while.
And what was
Actually, the chief clerk coordinator just in most recently. Passing away, but
I'm sorry. Project manager is vacant.
it was it's restructured, if you will, so that was addressed in the earlier reference to the positions. It's reconceived, if you will, so it has been the assistant director, the deputy director position. So we are a deputy director of the PRA, but we need that position in order to manage the workload that is coming through the PRA, as well as future capacity.
Okay, so you don't have a deputy director any longer, you're going to have a project manager.
Correct.
And then I'm sorry, the chief clerk has recently passed, so you are filling that also.
Yes, we intend to do this.
Great, thank you. This is an excellent org chart. I'm just going to say, I appreciate the fact we have everyone's names and titles. And then any other, I did have a question on, it looked to me like on your zoning board, you were actually not going to fund the two alternates.
The zoning board, Madam Chair, that is under the Department of Inspection Standards.
Oh, it is. Okay. All right. Thank you. You could have seen that. All right. Thank you. I'll save that question.
We don't, just for the record, none of the appointments to our pensions are paid positions.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, excellent. I'll let, go ahead. Councilmember, more questions.
Oh, no, you can
Yes,
answer.
no.
You share one. And thank you both for all, for being here to answer questions. I had a few quick ones. So one, just building off the org chart, the deputy directors like this, the line here, why are there so many different grades? Like, some are at a 20, some are at a 25, is it the longevity? Are they doing, it looks like they're equal, but then their salary grades vary quite a bit. Is that
They
20
were-
to 25? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you moving forward, we wanted to include a range of 820 to 822 in order to provide some equitable ranges within those capacities there. So I'm not sure historically where that variation would occur unless you had some.
I could just, yeah, so I could just say that while the deputy director, which is my position, is shown as a line here. I also assist the director with the operations of the department, although, you know, this is the sort of line of direct reports. With respect to director of fiscal operations, Sally also provides services to other departments that are under the umbrella of economic development, and that explains that.
Thank you so much, Bob. I have a few more. The change that Chairwoman Anthony was just asking about, the project manager for PRA at roughly 71,000. And is that just, so we defunded the deputy director, which was at 41,000, and we're creating a new position to replace that at 70? Was the deputy also paid for by PRA? Like, how was the deputy previously paid for?
Yes, it was picked up.
Yeah, a portion of the salary is paid for by PRA, $43,000 represented the general fund share of that salary.
Okay.
And so the savings is only $43,000 for the total salary.
Was, okay, that was my
Higher,
question of like what
yes.
that gap was.
Yep.
Okay. It's like, you knew what I was going to ask. It's like, we're spending so much time together. And then for the commissions, I guess I have two more questions. For the commissions, you guys staff so many commissions, or are on so many commissions / provide staff. I guess the question I'm trying to ask is it the same couple staff who provide the staffing for all of these, or is it, like, at what level is the staffing being provided?
Yeah, so we staff all of the boards you see on the left side, and then we have employees who sit on the state boards on the right-hand side. Typically, the way this works is that we have one of our planners, principal planners typically that are staffing that have one of these commissions as their primary staffing portfolio. In some cases, we have some staff who will staff more than one commission depending on the workload. And then there would be a manager that kind of oversees that staff. So for example, on City Plan Commission, Choyan Manager Carr, who's principal planner, that's his primary board, but I also oversee his work and I also oversee that commission as well. So typically a manager and one, sometimes more staff will be assigned to a commission.
And then my last question is, for the comp plan, which you were so excited about, at least you know I'm so excited about, how, I don't know, where my words are today. How are you planning to fund like the outreach and the additional staffing or consultants or whatever you're going to do? Is that grant funded? Is the state providing any backup for that? Are we seeing it here? Where is that?
Yeah, most of that is within an existing budget item for professional services. We don't anticipate too much of outside technical assistance. A lot of that resources will be for sundry supplies or other types of small amounts that we would need as we go out to multiple locations throughout the community. Office supplies and other materials. There will be some professional services we may want to come into, but also reproduction and printing and compilation of the documentation as well as before.
But the staffing will mostly be in-house as opposed to like consultants.
Yeah, we've got a great team
Yeah.
of professionals, and principal planners and support staff. We, leading up to the initiation of the comprehensive plan, have been doing some internal workshops among ourselves to kind of get the lay of the land and get more depth at being out and in the public and reviewing kind of what has been planned in the past and brushing off some documents, reviewing them, and so that we can go out into the community fully formed and more better responsive to the concerns and aspirations that we hear from the community as we move forward.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Councilman, for those great questions. Like the chairwoman, I would like to compliment this workshop. It's probably the best one we've seen. Starting with the top, the people of Providence, that should be the top of every phone chair. So thank you for that. My questions are more surrounding the boards and commissions that we have. Who does the financial oversight on those boards and commissions? Like the PRA, the building authority, the business loan fund.
So I think each one has a different structure and organization, and the redevelopment agency, the oversight would come through me as executive director. We manage different accounts, including the Affordable Housing Trust, Land Bank, and other housing bond finance mechanisms that are being actively drawn down upon through multiple requests through groups and entities that are involved in the development of affordable housing and other development initiatives. The boards and commissions really don't have a lot of budgetary requirements, but probably can speak to some of the.
Sure. Yeah, I can just add to what Joe says. So in this list of 9 boards and commissions, the top 6 don't have any budget. They're unpaid board members, professional staff paid out of paid out of this budget. So they don't manage money in any way. As Joe said, the redevelopment agency has a board that oversees the expenditure of money, and Joe's the executive director. The Providence Business Loan Fund likewise has its own board that meets monthly that approves the disbursement of loans, and then there are professional staff within our department that do all the administration of that. With respect to the Public Building Authority, that's a little bit different. We staff it to the extent that we provide limited clerical services, but that body is primarily funded through bonds that it issues to do capital improvements in the city. There is a budget line in our budget that assists with the operation of the Public Building Authority for their administration. They have a couple of paid staff. They have a paid attorney, but they operate kind of as an agency that is a little bit outside of the city's operation.
Thank you. Just to follow up on the last point, is there any other outside funding sources for any of these agency or commissions or boards?
Not through the city's general fund.
The redevelopment agency may receive monies for fees and interests, but that is really kind of circular funding mechanism. As the money go out, we attach some percentages of it to support future.
Thank you. In terms of like the PRA, how are those expenditures accounted for, tracked? Who's responsible for that?
The staff and myself and the staff. the PRA.
Can I just follow up on that question, would you mind?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so Director, I'm just wondering, just for my education, so all the PRA positions, why are they not funded within that? How does that all work? And when you say that part of it's general fund, part of it's PRA, can you just explain how those positions are funded? Or is the city reimbursed? I'm just not sure how that works for the PRA.
So Pierre,
I don't know, Sally, do you want to come up and speak a little bit about PRA?
Thank you, Sally. Nice to see you.
So PRA is mostly funded by general fund. It has always been funded by general fund for as long as
The staff.
the staff has always been funded, if that's what we're talking about. So other than that, then the project manager, that was actually a position that was created 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a little longer. And it morphed into the deputy director. So now that the deputy director had left, it seems to have more, we need a project manager than a deputy director. So, and that is fully funded by the PRA itself. Other than that, the other positions are all funded through general fund. And the general fund supports the PRA in that way. That's the support the city gives to the general fund.
Madam Auditor.
Are there any employees that receive stipends from PRA? Yes, the executive director receives a stipend and the secretary, the recording secretary receives a stipend. Follow?
Yes, please.
How do you differentiate city work from PRA work? It is usually done outside of city time. So it's extra time that they put in that is not during the 8:30 to 4:30 time period. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that clarification. Okay, sorry.
No,
I was just-
great question. My next question is in terms of the Providence Housing Trust Fund. Is there any plans to get more money in there or to create that a little more sustainable?
There was a bond issuance that provided kind of the basis of funding for that. It was supplemented with ARPA funds that have a limited timeline for in which they have to be directed out. They are being drawn down. That will really prove to be a kind of a one-time a boon to the Housing Trust Fund. I mentioned we do have a small amount of recurrent fees and interest that will return. Some of them will be decades forward as some of the financing mechanisms mature or come due. There is the potential maybe to find some uncommitted or unutilized ARPA funds that might exist elsewhere in the city that could possibly be directed there, but the longer term prognosis for that housing trust is that that money has been put in relatively short time, been put to good use in order to initiate the development and construction of hundreds of affordable units throughout the city. And as that fund depletes, there is no current initiative to replenish that or find ways to find other mechanisms in which to direct towards that.
Thank you. So obviously before our time, a good chunk of that money went to a development that hasn't developed. So my follow-up question is there any conversations with the owners of the Superman building currently happening on what the plan is for that development?
There is, the money was earmarked, if you will, to support the redevelopment of that project. There are conversations ongoing in terms of what their status is. There is some modicum of work occurring there. As we see with all developers in the city and in a broader area, that there's a current economic condition that has stymied their ability to move forward, primarily related to interest rates. In fact, some of the housing trust fund money requests that we have received in the last couple of months were to support gaps that were created not only by the rising escalation of rates, but also the continual escalation of construction costs. There is, including among the nonprofit developers as well as the commercial developers and other larger bond finance initiatives, there is a bit of a wait and watch attitude going on right now. There seems to be some indication that the escalation of those rates and construction material costs may be slightly plateauing. Until we see those rates decline in a more significant way, and all those multiple components that it takes in order to greenlight a project, we are really somewhat in a process of stasis right now. That does not diminish the desire for others in the nonprofit and affordable housing sector to request gap funding and gap financing, but we are getting down to a lower rate of monies that will be available for that. Those advocates for those monies were solicited through a notice. They were pre-qualified. They're a queue. Many of them are waiting to assemble their other financial stacks in order to make their projects viable, and will, I think, to an extent, be first come, first served at this point in terms of when they're ready. We try to modulate the amounts that we will distribute in order to provide more equitable distribution among those who come before us.
Thank you. So just to confirm regarding the Superman, in that agreement that has been signed, there's no like deadline on when they have to develop to get this money from the city, correct?
That is the monies earmarked for that were allocated into the bond. So unlike ARPA, which those funds need to be expended by 2026, there's a little bit longer running time on the bond finance earmarked. So there is a timeline on it. I think in conversations that if ultimately the hope is that something moves forward, that we are being respectful for those externalities that are happening globally, not only in Providence, but in the country around the world in terms of price escalation.
I would just ask if you could keep the council updated on those conversations. That's, I think, the biggest development happening in the city. There's a lot of interest, so we just ask that.
Absolutely, Council.
Thank you, Director. I just had some questions for the community development. Is that a different time, Emily? Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
Good evening, Emily Freeman, Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Emily. You do lots of great work. They're pretty straightforward questions. I'm just asking for the utilization rate on the Let's Say program and the home repair program, if you have any information on those two.
Absolutely. So we have, for everyone's awareness, 2 in-house programs that we administer directly to the community. This is the city's CDBG funded home repair program and the Let's Say Providence program. Both of those are funded through federal grants that the city receives through HUD. The lead grant is a competitive award with a 42-month term that we recently received from HUD in 2020. The CDBG funding is our entitlement grant that we must allocate year over year. The council just recently, is in the process of approving the CDBG budget, which will renew the home repair program at a rate of $275,000 over the next fiscal year. We anticipate through that grant, we'll be able to serve and enroll an additional 20 to 25 households. We structure that assistance as a deferred payment 0% interest loan to eligible owner occupants. There is no credit requirement. You must solely be an income eligible household by HUD standards. It's structured as deferred payment 0% interest loan to assist households, oftentimes elderly households, who cannot afford the economic shock of a failed roof or a failed sewer system or something like that. The loan, as deferred payment 0% interest, does not trigger any type of monthly payment. So it's an affordable, accessible option for homeowners who are not able to pay for that sudden expense. It's due upon sale or transfer, so oftentimes we do have program income that comes back from loans that are repaid at sale of the property. And so we reinvest that to assist additional households. We are running down, as we're approaching the end of the fiscal year, we're running through the available home repair funds that we have now, but what we'll do is continue to offer applications in anticipation of the new renewal funding that will be coming in later in the summer. So any questions on that, or if you're looking for any materials to provide to your constituents, please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to continue to enroll. On our lead program, we have tons of capacity, so if you are having any board meetings or you have any constituents who have children under the age of 6, lead hazards, we are able to offer forgivable loans through that competitive grant at 3-year and 5-year terms for owner occupants and investors. And we have plenty of grant capacity. Due to the pandemic, we had a brief shutdown of the program, and so we have ample room for enrollment, and we encourage anyone to take advantage of that financing opportunity.
How much of a backlog do we have on the home repair loan program?
It is very high degree of interest. We typically have anywhere between 3 and 5 inquiries per week. And so we typically have a waiting list of folks, usually between 100 and 120 folks at any given time, who are reaching out to us looking for assistance. I am pleased to note that there is an additional program through the Department of Inspections and Standards to address those with housing code violations. So that should help us with addressing this pent-up demand in the community. And then we'll continue through the CDBG program, of course, to continue to enroll households.
Just so I can have a better understanding on how much we've done with this program the past year. How many households have we done this year through that program?
So we'll serve about 25 this year. There is a report that was shared through the IRP committee, making sure that you get a copy of that does a report of our lending history since we initiated the program in 2015. So we've issued well over 100 loans, served a very diverse array of communities and wards in Providence, and there's really no shortage of demand. So we're thankful that the council has opted to renew that program.
Thank you, Emily.
Okay, Councilor Peterson.
Just to follow up on his question. Do you know roughly on average how much of a loan request each is?
Sure. So I believe at last calculation, the average loan amount was about 16,000. That has ticked up over the years for the reasons that Joe, Director Mulligan has already explained, that construction costs are continuing to creep up. So that means things like roof repairs and sewer repairs, siding are all getting progressively more expensive. So it's getting more and more challenging for our low-income households, especially our aging households, to address these repairs.
Actually, next question is to the company.
Okay, no, yes.
Is there an allocation set up for the comp plan, the comprehensive plan? through the planning department?
For funding?
Yeah.
Just internally, the existing amounts that we have, we're projecting maybe, not much more than tens or 20s of thousands of dollars. It's not going to be a large expenditure at this point. We don't anticipate any large amounts coming forward.
And one more question. In regards to the neighborhood liaison that we're looking to fill the position, I can imagine that that particular person's the heaviest burden will be in this process of the comprehensive plan. Can you identify any other needs for that particular person on a daily basis outside of the company? Because I feel like the comprehensive plan will take up quite a bit of time, but then after that, I'm kind of wondering what more this particular neighborhood liaison could offer the position in the department.
Yeah, one of the things is technology. There'll be a web-based platform for the comprehensive plan moving forward for communication and updates and compilation of information. There will be a need for the ability to work with community members to have some type of experience on working in the public realm and dealing with local issues. It wasn't specifically outlined, but some, affinity with planning and development in the built realm and in the urban context. So kind of a multifaceted role, not specific, and to provide support to the other staff as well, the principal planners and administrative staff.
Yes, Counselor Aaron.
Thank you so much, Shirley. I have two more questions. One is for Emily. Good to see you. Thank you for all you do. Love working with you. You were talking about the home repair program with Counselor Sanchez. I think when this committee got an update from Director Hawkins or Chief Hawkins a number of weeks ago about the ARPA funds, there was, I'm not remember exact amounts of money, but there had been money set aside for expanding the home repair fund. Are we still spending down ARPA funds to like supplement the program that you're discussing, or where is that, and how do we better utilize that to support this like large backlog?
So that ARPA, there's a $3 million line item that was identified in ARPA Ordinance 2. My understanding is that all ARPA line items that had not yet been contracted or awarded during the transition are currently under review, and that remains under review. But we look forward to having those conversations with you all.
Okay. And if they just, I guess I'm wondering like how that wasn't, and that might be a question for Chief Hawkins, but how, if we have this large backlog of 150 buildings, how that wasn't spent or how that wasn't contracted during the last couple of years, if there's such a large backlog.
So the permit was issued prior to the changeover in administration, and at this point, we've just held on making awards while that review is ongoing.
And are we going to get an update on that?
Yes, the plan is to come back with a new ARPA.
Yeah, we'll be discussing ARPA.
When might that be?
I'm not sure exactly when, but it'll be soon.
Soon.
It'll
Okay.
be soon, yeah.
Because it also strikes me that there's a lot of federal funding for things like energy efficiency and others that get held up because there's so many like health and safety repairs that need to be made in homes that can't be done through energy efficiency funds at the state level. And there's a lot of like housing, especially for low income housing, that can't like access other government programs because they haven't been able to do some of these basic home repair things. And so it's just like we're leaving money on the table for people who need it most, which I know you know, and I'm just saying out loud. The second question I have, and my last one, I was really excited to see the position here for the State Streets for All manager. And I imagine, but correct me if I'm wrong, that because that's federal money, we're not seeing how the rest of that State Streets money from the federal government is being spent, but do you guys have an update and will that be brought to us at some point, how that large federal grant will be spent providing safe and complete streets in the community? Anyone? I'm looking at everyone all at once.
Yeah, well, so yeah, so the Safe Streets, you're right that's a position that's grant funded for the duration of that project to manage that project. We have had a couple of meetings now with the administration to talk about the implementation of that grant, and we have been in the process of honing in on exactly how it's going to be spent, where and for what projects. And we should have that information, I would say, in the coming few weeks.
Would you be able to bring that conversation back to the committee or another one? Just because I know that that's a topic of a lot of interest.
And who is going to be directing that work within your organization?
So day-to-day direction of that will be Jess Lance, our Director of Special Projects. But with with my oversight, with Director Mulligan's oversight as well.
Councilor Sanchez?
No, I would just ask the administration to get us an update on the ARPA stuff as soon as possible. Ideally, I mean, it's probably too late at this point, but ideally, I think it would have made a lot of sense to do that in the budget to see how everything correlates it in the bigger picture. I'm not sure if you guys can answer or comment on any of that, but.
I think we're kind of coming back in June to talk about CIP and ARPA. And this is that.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilman.
Did that include also the interest that is earning? Could I ask that question from the beginning? In terms of the upper money?
Yeah, we can talk, I can get you that,
So, and as far as like, it's earning money, it's earning interest, right? So
correct.
is that under the upper guidelines, or is that gonna be a separate fund?
So under upper guidelines, we are allowed to use, we are allowed to earn interest, we can turn, so we put in an interest bearing account, then we have a small piece in the short-term treasury. And it's not prohibited under ARPA. And we have the expectation that we'll take that revenue into the general fund as interest revenue.
You know what the amount is so far,
I
or?
want to say it's around 3 or 4%, but we are projecting that for the end of fiscal 23, we'll have about 1.5 million.
Along those lines, there's an RFP that we actually is being going to be serviced. And Emily, probably you can speak to that, or maybe others. It was through the ARA clinic that we actually held back. And just wanted to know if there's a plan to put that out there again for an RFP. Was that the organizations to provide some jobs and so forth? Yeah. The second phase of it. It's close to $1 million.
It's not in the planning.
Yeah, no, that RFP is being overseen by the Office of Economic Development.
Correct.
Yeah, we can talk about that under the Office of Economic Development discussion if you'd like. They're on tonight too.
Yeah, 10 minutes, I'll be back. And I was working myself backwards now to the directors, taking advantage of the fact that Emily's there. Thank you for all your work, serving with Mary Kay Harris, the chairwoman, and we as a city council, we just passed the budget. So thank you for all your work and helping us out. I'm sure we'll continue to ask a lot of questions and look forward to that portal that the director was referencing to. So that way we can have more transparency and that way we can, really just tell our constituents, go to this website, or instead of bothering so much the staff for sometimes very not in-depth information. So my question to the director, now that you've been on the ground before us in terms of budget, you identified the big issues in our city. Where does it reflect in your budget that you're going to be doing besides the comprehensive plan? What you're going to tackle, the first two things?
In terms of issues facing the city,
Yeah,
I think that will come from the people who we work with. They will tell us what, we'll learn from them where they think the priorities are, where they think the city should focus their attention and what direction they'd like to take us in. But one of the things I've been concerned about was the paucity of construction starts that have occurred over the last decade. That is, I think, contributed to the exacerbation of rising costs for housing. I'd like to find ways to we've been very active on identifying parcels and opportunities for building and construction to get those out into the market and to identify and nurture local talent that could contribute to developing those. And I think working comprehensively with Director Thomas of Economic Development Strategies, that we should find more ways to support industries that not only exist here, but to attract new businesses so that as the potential for the population increases, that people have find opportunities for dignity and good quality work and opportunities in which to enhance and build their lives. I think there's been many good things that have happened over the past. I think attention to mobility and connectivity, as well as protection of what many people think is beautiful about Providence and what's special about it. And so we want to find that balance between preserving the integrity of the city as it has historically existed, yet find opportunities to strengthen our standing competitively, regionally, as well as nationally, to be a place, a destination for business and higher education and travel and leisure and tourism and many other aspects. So it's really a broad-based approach to looking at all the multiple dynamics that affect the city, not only to enhance it, but to address some of the concerns that might have held back parts of the city, as well as people who live there, so that they can fully realize their potential.
Thank you. Just another question I was going to ask more about. Under the budget, and maybe the PDA expenses. What is that? And also, can you speak on what's your relation, or at least working with the public building authority, and how they complement in terms of the construction and so forth, and your relationship so far with that?
Yeah, I'll let Bob give you a background, but we are, I think what's been beneficial in the new administration and the personnel involved is that we do have, I think, a much more broader collaborative convening that we're doing right now. But as to the specifics of that, probably want to.
Yes.
The people.
So, and I might defer to finance on this particular line item. It's always lived in our budget, but it's a line that helps fund the administration of that board.
Okay, so PDA has expenses, legal expenses, accounting expenses, they pay fiscal agent fees for some of the bonds, insurance, and so we give them a stipend to help cover some of those costs.
To the board or just for the
To the
administration?
PDA, yeah. And they,
So we give them $75,000?
We do,
Okay.
they submit an annual budget that the board has voted on to me. They get a quarterly stipend, not a stipend, but one of our bonds has an administrative approval for that. So they submit to me an annual budget and I disperse quarterly disbursements to them. They're also included in the city's audit, so they're required to be audited at the end of every year. And their audit is included in our audit. They're a component unit of the city. So we oversee finance, at least oversees and reviews their audit and reviews their budget.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have a couple of just quickly, Green and Complete Streets Advisory Commission. Is that ordinance? How is that?
It is, yes, yes. There used to be something called the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. This supplanted that. It was adopted by ordinance.
Okay, and how are how many members and who has the appointing authority?
That's, we have a designee.
We staff it. I believe there are mayoral as well as council appointments on that.
Okay. I'll check on that. Great. And I wanted to ask about the unfilled position in principal planners.
Yes, so Jess Lance was elevated to Director of Special Projects back in the fall. And that is the position that was left unfilled when she advanced. There was a period of time where she was serving in an acting capacity, and we intend to make her permanent director as opposed to acting, and so now that that's happening, we intend to fill that principal planner.
Did you ever, before Jess took the associate director of special projects, did you have a position like that, or did you create that?
That was filled by Martina Haggerty in the last administration.
Thank you. I think that's all I have. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm not sure this question is for planning or economic opportunity, maybe both. Is there any conversations about the vision of nightlife here in Providence?
I would defer that to the next.
That's going to be AC.
Witness.
Thank you.
Yes, one more.
On the rental of land and buildings. What is that? Because of the rental of the
rent at 444 Westminster.
the rent, that's their portion of it?
Correct.
What is the total rent that we pay there?
Next fiscal year, we got 1.3 million.
1.3 million? And that's compared to before, what is the increase? Is that,
It
is
was
that
about
like
$100,000 just between current fiscal year and next fiscal year.
100,000?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Director and Deputy Director and everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All your- all the
Thank you very
wonderful
much.
things you do for our community. We appreciate your service. Very much. Yes.
But as long as it gets a lot, so.
So next on our. Economic development, I believe is next. So Director Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director and Deputy Director.
Deputy
Director, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Would you like to kick off with the narrative, or would you like to jump right into the budget? What would you prefer?
I can give a quick narrative.
Thank you.
So most of you have met me, but I'm the new Director of Economic Development for the city, started in mid-March. This is, this department used to be Economic Opportunity. We're now calling it the Office of Economic Development. The line of effort on equity though remains, with Dean Wesley heading the Economic Opportunity line of effort. So the MBE, WBE program will remain underneath Deneen. And once we have a director of First Source, we're close to making an offer on that position. They will be working closely with Deputy Director Dean on that. The small business coordinator for now will remain underneath the dean. But eventually that role will be like an economic development role, looking to support all our cities within the city of Providence, so that the deputy director can focus on our equity efforts in our underserved communities. units. Besides that, this will be a building year. We're going to be re-looking at how the department functions in supporting economic development and this vision of the departments coordinating with each other, especially with the comprehensive plan and how that land use supports economic development, as Director Mulligan was talking about. And my chief goal will be the production of an economic development plan that will align with the state's SEDS, which the draft just came out, the SEDS being a comprehensive economic development strategy, as the state looks to form an economic development district, which is will give us favorable status with the Economic Development Administration underneath Secretary Raimondo. That is an evolution from the Rhode Island Innovates 2.0 report, which came out previously. So we will be doing a cluster analysis as well as an occupational analysis, what will help inform our workforce development strategy, as I also have workforce solutions reporting to me, which is not a general fund item. So with that, I will turn to finance.
Thank you.
If you're following along in your budget book on page 45, our Office of Economic Development is not a revenue generating department. Salaries in fiscal 24 are proposed at $682,796, an increase of $205,412 over the 23 budget. The department has requested the following organizational changes: move the Director of Economic Development and confidential assistant to the Economic Development to this department from the Planning Department. No budgetary impact, is just switching from one department to another. And then subsequent to the proposed budget submission, the department is requesting that the Business Research Analyst and Director of Communications move from Planning to Economic Development Department at no cost to the operating budget. We'd also like to defund a senior compliance officer at a savings of $67,660. Total benefits for fiscal 24 are proposed $211,408. A decrease of $21,368 from the 23 budget. Total services in fiscal 24 are proposed $552,414. This is a decrease of $707,427 from the 23 budget. And this decrease is due to funding availability and ARPA for youth jobs. Total supplies for fiscal 24 are proposed $3,500, an increase of $2,500 over the fiscal 23 budget for office supplies, and there is no capital budget in this department.
Thank you, Joel. Director Thomas, can you just explain just the structure, I guess, you have with planning? Just looking at it from the outside, it seems pretty disconnected. I mean, I don't know, what are the day-to-day roles, conversations, collaborative
Just of the
efforts?
umbrella
Yeah,
department.
yeah, because that's new, right, from this administration, like.
Yeah. So in order to attract business, to nurture an economic development, like an economic sector or a cluster, let's say like life sciences, we have to be able to have the land use support those functions, as well as the infrastructure to form a foundation for that economic activity as well. So I work very closely with Director Mulligan and Deputy Director Azar and Deputy Director and Director Friedman on making sure that we're aligning our infrastructure goals to support the economic activity that I'm trying to attract to the city. So, for example, let's say a life science business wants to come here and they're looking for lab space. I have to be able to, or I'm projecting that we're gonna need this much lab space. I need to be able to work very closely with the planning directors to support that activity and the land is there, the transportation is there, the wet lab space is there, all the rest of it. So it's a very close conversation. And frequently, we will get questions about other types of space availability questions. So like, I need 25,000 square feet, where can I go? And a lot of that activity is within, like the director of real estate will work a lot. You were asking about that. I think that would be a lot of their job, is to help me find where businesses can go. And so we work very closely. Another activity where I work very closely with planning is in the real property work group. Another part of economic development is making sure that we have a workforce for the businesses that are here. And that a lot of that involves also creating places where people can live and housing, as well as places where they can have childcare, which is another economic sector that I'm looking to support and grow, that they have places to play. So that we'll get into the nightlife and cultural space discussion that I'll have with ACT when we get to the ACT budget. So that's where all those linkages is. It's like really economic development is that broad definition of quality of life where people can come here to work, live. And work. It's all economic activity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Please.
I mean, you have a couple months under your belt. I mean, we don't expect you to have the answers completely for the future of Providence. But is there any specific sectors or industries that you see Providence growing in?
Okay, sure. So our priorities so far, and this is all going to be confirmed with data in our economic development plan, but our initial clusters that we're anticipating supporting are food and beverage with our strength with JWU and just our restaurants and nightlife activity here. Life science, where this administration, one of our goals is to build better relationships with the technology commercialization arms of the universities to make sure that the research activity that they're generating actually benefits Providence and that we're using that research to create businesses here that will also employ residents of Providence and also attract the next creative workforce that will drive the city's growth. Design with an arts and culture component as well. We see that as having a huge economic impact. A lot of times that is discounted. People think, oh, it's just a nice painting. There's huge economic impact to our arts, culture, and design. Both. And some of how we're supporting that already is that, and we can discuss that more when Deputy Director Salkin's up here, but a lot of artists don't realize that they can be a business. So we're building a synergy between our small business activity that we're doing and some of the programs that Arts and Culture is running, so we can educate our artists and designers and artisans on how they can sell online, how they can monetize their design activity. Blue economy, of course. Working with Workforce Solutions, our workforce development arm, to develop training programs to support the wind industry. But there's also a lot of other activity that goes along when you do global wind, from like applied manufacturing to undersea manufacturing, like building the turbines and all that, to the actual maritime operations on the water. All of that are like supply chains we should be supporting and growing and getting residents in Providence in. And it's going to be feeding into the tech hub application we're working on with the state for EDM.
Thank you. That's exciting. Learning some of my favorite stuff like food and art. What's the reason of funding the senior compliance position?
We have just found for doing as we rebuild the First Source program, we just felt that between the director of First Source that we're looking at and the compliance officer and the analyst that will be able to cover all the reporting and analysis needs that we'll need for that program. We also work with Building Futures on, they help with some of the compliance as well. So we felt it was a redundant position. Yeah, but we will ensure that there's bilingual capability in the department.
Just the last question, just to confirm, I think you played a big role with the hardest hit fund grant. Is that part of the APROS or the ARPA stuff that's kind of got rolled back in?
Yeah, so a little bit about the hardest hit communities grant. So that was one of the grant opportunities that was actually reviewed in its fullness, and that one was actually went back out to bid on that. So what we did was completely revised the scope of the RFP. So it had a new name, which was the Building Resilience in Underserved Providence Communities RFP. So that went out. We did a lot of outreach on that RFP. We had a conference/workshop for those community organizations who previously applied, and then additional community organizations as well, to just attend and learn more about the RFP and what's the scope of it, which was really focused more on preparing communities for a potential disaster, which disaster can mean a plethora of things. And we had really good attendance on that conference. We had 65 folks on the call representing a lot of different nonprofit organizations. And then when we received the bids on that, those are actually under review. And we received 12 proposals for that, 13.
So the
When's that being announced, or what's the?
So we're trying to finish the scoring. We have 6 people scoring. Finish the scoring next week and announce the bid, the work in time for the next box meeting. The reason, just to give you a little color, it originally was a NOFA, and we felt very generalized. And my intention with rewriting it as an RFP was to make it very specific, so that if we have a disaster such as COVID-19 again, or a potential flooding, which is, another northeasters like projected for here, that we have very specific impact on the communities that we were targeting are underserved. So the RFP was put out with that intention.
I personally support that. I know the NOFA was pretty general and messy.
Yeah, so we got much more focused responses this time. So we can really see where the impact is.
And the amounts was also different on that RFP as well. For the hardest hit communities, NOFA, it was amounts of either $10,000 grant or up to $20,000 grant. So an organization can get up to $30,000 if they're approved for all of those. And then for the current RFP, it's up to $50,000.
What's the total funds available for that?
Was what, 3?
So the total was, I believe, 300,000. There's a separate line under ARPA that's still under review, which was essentially the second round of hardest communities. So that portion is still under review.
Thank you.
All right, yes, Councilor Pichardo.
I'll go in that conversation there. So the ones that are still under review is the one that's close to $1 million, correct? 900?
Are you talking about the service provider one?
Yeah.
That's a workforce development one. It's 825,000. Yeah.
You're talking about
Which one?
Yeah, the money,
the
yeah.
mentor ROI.
Well, we actually,
No, that was $995,000.
right,
That's.
Oh,
That's
that
the
one's
one.
under review.
that's the one that's under review.
Yeah.
And that's gonna go to an RFP too, under the.
No, I think Chief Hawkins is still reviewing that one. Yeah.
So no, but it won't, or is just more review of?
We haven't, the decision hasn't been made on that.
Okay, I just wanna
Yeah,
understand that.
yeah, that's
I know
okay. There's a
at
lot.
times-
There's,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the other ones, as the deputy indicated, those were RFP too, they came through the process of the supply contract.
Is that for the second round of the hardest hit?
Yeah.
So essentially at the time, so we did a NOFA for the first round of that funding. And we were preparing a NOFA for a separate NOFA for the second round of that funding. But essentially what was decided at the time, because of the amount of applicants that we had received for the first round, was we just rolled over the funding into the first round. So we just added to the funding to be able to fund more organizations. So those two lines had been combined. But so in this process, they're just separate lines that are being reviewed separately.
Can you mention there's 6 people reviewing this?
Mhm.
Who are they? What departments?
So Emily Freeman from Community Development, Matthew Schumate from Policy, I'm reviewing, Deem is reviewing, Anisha from Communications, and Brett Jacobs from Recovery.
Recovery.
He oversees the ARPA process in general.
I may have more going forward or another time.
Yes, Councilor Ingersoll. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I'm very excited that you're here. I have a few, if that's okay, Shirley? Yes. Okay, very good. Director, you mentioned the creation of the economic development plan and answered Councilor Sanchez's questions about some of the initial focus. Do you have a sense of the timeline of when we'll be seeing either drafts of that plan
Or toward, we're projecting, and don't hold me to this, like, hopefully by the end of the fiscal year.
And
Yeah.
so like a year from now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, there's one phrase I didn't understand. What's an economic development district? You said we're trying to become an economic development district.
So this, we're working with Commerce. So when the Economic Development Administration as part of Commerce was set up, they decided that one way they wanted to work was to work through regional organizations called economic development districts, to become an economic development district, and they can be run by nonprofits, localities. They're typically like regional planning organizations or COGs or similar.
Would it be the whole city would be the district, or would it be parts of the city?
It's going to be the state for Rhode Island. There was a
Oh, wow.
decision that because we're so small. So one of the challenges that, and I'm sure you're aware of all federal funding, is Rhode Island sometimes has a hard time competing with the California. Yeah, and so part of the strategy that we've been discussing with Commerce, we just decided that it made sense for the state to be the EDB.
Okay.
That's different
Yeah.
than say a Texas, which I forget how many they have, but they may have like 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. And then I have a few more, if that's okay. So you had mentioned that in the org chart, eventually small business and development might be moved, so it's not just under CADEM. But can you talk a little bit about how economic opportunity and equity will be woven through like all of the initiatives in economic development? I guess my concern is like, I would want to see it just siloed in what CADEM does, but that should be like something that's woven through our entire economic development strategies.
Sure. It's just a matter of focus, and that he can provide an oversight and kind of audit of the programs. And just so we have like a line of effort and not too many reports either. But honestly, what we're trying to do is, as we develop the economic development plan, really start looking at like, the new federal definition of equity, the federal programs, what are the definitions of the equity that they require, make sure part of CADEM's function and with the analysts will be to will create that data to make available to not just my departments, but like the new policy and resiliency directors department, so that we have, and we're tracking how we're performing in our underserved communities, as well as how well we're doing on things like minority women business certification, as well as some minority business creation in general, access to capital, all those things. So in some ways, it's kind of a false dichotomy because they'll be working really closely together. It's more just making sure we're balancing the workload.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then kind of building on that a little bit, I lost my train of thoughts. I'm gonna ask you a different question, actually.
No, that's okay.
Something else that I would love to see kind of infused across, and I know I've talked with Director Dormby about this, and I've also just recently chatted with Team Ed Commerce as they're building their like statewide economic development plan. How are you weaving in climate resilience into our economic development? And the one more sentence I'll say is I feel like, oh, I do remember my last question, so we'll come back to that in a sec. But people sometimes talk about like, oh, the green economy, the blue economy, and this economy, and that economy, but like, there's one world and one city. And so how are we building our economic development, recognizing like that the future has to be carbon free, you know, and in compliance with the state's act on climate, and also just the science of climate change, in compliance with the fact that we live on the coast bisected by rivers. Like how is our economic development like leading in climate change?
So I don't think of the green economy as a separate
Excellent,
thing.
that makes me so happy. Thank you. for saying that.
Yeah, I know people like to think of the blue, and the blue
Yeah.
economy is green, but it's not
Yeah,
just green,
yes.
and I try to,
Yeah.
so just to go back on the blue
Yeah.
economy 1 second, that includes things like defense,
Yeah.
support, like it's just everything kind of working waterfront.
Yeah.
which is
I just like using that as an
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
People act
yeah.
like there's like all these
But,
different. Yeah.
but just like IT,
Yeah.
like every industry is an IT industry, I think every industry is a green industry, so, and it's also in our infrastructure, so there's a couple of things. One, as we do the comprehensive plan, we're gonna have to incorporate, sea level rise.
Yeah.
Flood resilience, like mitigation, adaptation, has to be weaved into everything we're looking at in the comprehensive plan. So, and Mulligan and our directors are planning to back me up. So one thing we're doing is looking for opportunities within all the funding that we've received so far around infrastructure, where we can do design and engineering to help support not just implementing adaptation and preparing for climate change, but also pursuing other federal money that will help us do further mitigation and adaptation. So we've actually been collaborating a lot closer with FEMA on looking at how we're doing our planning to make sure that those checks and those metrics are being built in to our infrastructure planning. The other point of that is also looking not just at our buildings and how we're functioning, but at the industries that are coming in, how they're taking into account environmental, social, and governance in their own business plans, having those conversations, how we can do that better within Providence, working with the universities to take those technologies that they're developing and making sure they're available throughout our own industries, and making sure our workforce is trained and understand these new technologies. So like, for example, we met with REBA, and we'll talk about this later today with DIS, to make sure that our building code inspectors are trained on the latest and greatest energy codes.
Yeah.
And working with our builders to make sure their workforce are trained on what the greatest and latest and greatest is in terms, so we can get our structures to zero energy as close as possible. It's all related. It's all a system.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
That totally, and I'm so glad
Okay.
you answered it in that way, so thank you. And then I guess my last is, okay, how much of our economic development, you have used the phrase like business attraction, how much are you seeing is attraction versus building up what we already have here? Like how much are we just trying to attract big things versus?
No. I'm not a traditional economic development professional. I'm still, when I think of business attraction, I think of economic development as we're trying to take what's unique and great about Providence and make it better and for everyone, and that should attract people. So when I say business attraction, I'm almost like thinking I'm thinking of, we're attracting people who are gonna be entrepreneurial and want to
Yes,
employ
okay.
people that are already here and grow the town, the assets we already have and all the rest.
I guess
Yeah.
my last question is, how do you envision working with the council on things like that? So one, I love everything you're saying, so I'll just say that out loud. But two, like, how can we be good partners in this with you? And then also for the areas in our boards that could, and some of this will come up in comp planning, but like I'm a broken record about North Main Street, what the potential of North Main Street is. And we had a really great James Walk with the planning department. We had almost 100 people on our James Walk of North Main Street. That's more people I've been able to see with North Main Street total in the 10 years I've lived right off of North Main Street. So like, I'm not kidding. I normally just see the same one person over and over again on North Main Street. It's quite scary. Like, it is the same person. So how are you planning, or can we work with you to plan economic development specific to some of these corridors in our neighborhoods?
So as part of the mayor's stress on being a better run city and the best run city, communication is really key. So one, make sure everyone's using 311, please, because
Yes.
that's what's driving a lot of our workflow.
Okay.
But also, the small business walks we're doing
Mhm.
help me understand
Oh, yeah, thanks
what's
for coming to
unique
Hope Street.
about, yeah. So we did our first one with
Hope
the
Street.
council on Hope Street. We have ones we're planning for each ward. So, on different corridors, so that helps me understand the mix in each of your neighborhoods, and by talking to your businesses, I'm getting a sense of the challenges they're facing, sidewalks, trash, you know, yeah, access, I mean, those were the big ones in your ward, but I'm
but
sure
others
there are others, may have others. But I'm expecting to hear about those too.
Yeah.
But, and also just if you're getting phone calls, of course, I'm attending as many meetings and talking to the neighborhood groups as much as possible. But, if you're getting phone calls, just, I'm accessible, and to let me know what the issues you're hearing. But also, we're redesigning our website to be more accessible. We're working with, we're updating the data. We're making sure that we're gonna start. One reason I'm having the communications person that's gonna be supporting all of my departments is that we can do more push out of information, which we're not doing very well right now, right? So, so just making sure our social media is gonna be reactivated, that our data, our information is reflecting all the programs at the state level as well as the local level. CLIS, Director Pinto is gonna be doing an audit of all the assets that we're putting out to make sure they're culturally accessible. We're getting things translated on a much more consistent basis, at least into Spanish, and we're looking at other languages as well, see how much we can support.
Yeah.
I'm having some of my staff shadow state. And they're sitting with Commerce so that we know their programs inside and out and can speak to them. We're gonna be holding a lot of community workshops around certification, small business where people can come and just start their certification program and also tell us. And we're expanding the number of tables that are gonna be at the comprehensive plan launches so that they reflect all the departments underneath my umbrella.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'd love to work with you in the future, this is approximately realistic, about, I know I can only speak to Ward 3, but some of the vacant buildings are owned by the same few people who hold them because of the low tax rate of vacancy. So I'd love to work with like how we get actual businesses in those.
We can continue that.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I was just looking at your org chart, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so this is just for that one department.
just the one department.
Yeah.
I look at what's within the plan. And where city councils like to decide. Right? That,
I think that was just that was quickly done today. It wasn't the intention.
Yeah,
I just
so,
wanna- I
Yeah,
just wanna do the
Was
visual.
meant to be the same, so, yeah,
Yeah, that's why I wanted
Yeah.
to highlight that.
yeah, yeah.
The visual. And I see that you're also, overseeing the planning and development, right?
Yeah.
One is, do you have a date already when the comprehensive plan is gonna be launching or going forward?
So we're gonna be having 3 meetings, scheduling 3 meetings. Michael will do our intergovernmental person. At that point, we can go over the timeline. It's due January 2025 to the state, but there's a lot of milestones and the city council it will be earlier than that, but I would like to go over that at that time because I don't have it in front of me. Yeah.
Thank you. And like you, love to have, best innovative
Mhm.
thinkers in the city of Providence, and as you indicated, we're a very small city compared to one of the largest in New England, but it's still small compared to California and other bigger states competing for dollars, right? And so one of the things that I recognize is that, and we all recognize that our districts and people in the city of Providence are struggling. We've heard that, struggling economically, struggling housing wise. The issue with the homelessness and also the affordability of rental or even buying. We're focusing, it's a balance, right? Attracting the best talent and so forth, but in the same time, we're actually displacing. And the word that I hear in the community is the gentrification. So with that said, one, have you thought about communities that are struggling, particularly mostly minority communities, and then it's based also on the economic averages that they're earning, right? And increasing their capacity. Is there any thought in terms of how the economic plan as we're going to, you're going to be developing and so forth, in enriching their training over time and given the workforce plan in a sense? Can you speak on that?
Sure. So I do oversee workforce solutions, which we weren't presenting tonight because they're federally funded. So I'm not going to go into it in detail, and I would love to set something up with you. I'll work with Mike to get that so we can go more into the workforce development plan. Just because I don't want to take away from going over our budget. Yeah, but we are doing a full audit of everything we're doing on workforce solutions. We're actually going to be kicking off the update of the local workforce development plan, which needs to align with the state. We have plans to make sure that the resumes that we're getting into the first source system, which are also being fed into those workforce development programs and improving that workflow. And we are increasing we're doing an occupational analysis to see where the demand is really in Providence. So that we do not only are doing pre-apprenticeship training, but that once they complete our pre-apprenticeship training, we actually have jobs to place them in real pathways. Then we're not just training people to do for occupations that there's no demand for. So we're going through that audit right now of all our lines of effort on the job training. The other thing we're doing is getting more aggressive about expanding the amount of federal funding that we have coming in beyond real funds.
Is there a plan to keep track of the jobs that we create under the economic development?
Yes,
Under your leadership?
yes. And the plan will have measures of success. Job growth will be the obvious one.
Yeah.
But not the only one.
And that will be gauged on the website and so forth, or at least, like, for example, in the city of Providence now, how many jobs are, we know that number, correct? Based on the census and
Yeah.
prediction and so forth.
I think, I mean, we're in the preliminary stages of our engagement strategy around the economic development plan.
Yeah.
We're trying to launch the comp plan first. But yes, we can consider and discuss how we can share some of this economic data on our website.
And the reason why I ask is also is because, again, going to neighborhoods in terms of the struggle and real jobs, what I'm seeing is that, like CNAs, for example, right? Technology may be available in certain communities or in downtown or even probably in the city of Providence, but how they're utilizing it and how we're training the future or the current workforce and how we are represented in the unemployment lines, for those who are not even in the measurements of who's working, looking for job, who's employed and so forth. So going into the budget, or at least looking at, as you were describing, the first source,
Yes.
and also just again, the org chart. One of the challenges that I have sitting on a couple of boards and this hearing it is that the MBE, WBE compliance, right? Seeing the RFPs pretty much not participating in a lot of waivers going through. And there's no compliance, there's no teeth. My conclusion is that there's no teeth in these type of programs, whether it's the first source or the MBE, WBE. So would it make sense to have a department and really staff that they could go out to these work sites and really hold people to the fire?
So we're auditing our MBE, WBE workflow. It's going to be a process, but we've already put oversight into place to reduce the number of waivers, or at least have a tighter oversight on the waivers signed. So that's already started to be put into place. What I would like to suggest is we've been going through that data this week. So we have data going back to 2.5 years of our trends on waivers, which hadn't been compiled before. And I would like to sit down with you and go over that and go into our plans on our initial plans for that. And also our plans for improving, we're looking at improving our outreach on RFPs so that they're going out over channels that people are actually using, namely their phone. So, but this is all in development.
And under your plan and under the budget,
Yeah.
is that also being considered for this year in terms of that support?
Yeah, that's
or-
going to
or
be
just-
one of the priorities of the communications person, and then the director of purchase. There is an MBE, WBE working group that's already been convened. That is not just my department, it's other parts, because this is not just my department has to be involved in this. So the RFP template has already been reviewed, audited by DEIB and purchasing to be much more accessible and responsive to people maybe new to our process, but while still involving everything we need. The compliance instructions have been optimized and reviewed, and that's going to be going out. And we're re-looking at all the processes and how we provide oversight on that.
Okay. Yes, Council.
So basically, we took the question I was gonna ask, so. This is more, just a follow-up comment,
Yeah.
in just a segue from what you're talking about. One of the biggest frustrations that I hear about, from small business owners is how difficult the MBE, WBE application is.
Yes.
And I myself have gone through the process with people in an effort to help, and it is an extremely arduous process. It's just being very wordy for lack of a better word. One of the things I would love to be able to see, and it sounds like you already have this plan in place, which I have to say, I'm really impressed with everything that, all the measures that are being taken. Small business, especially for our Black and brown communities, there needs to be more of a development in the process of being able to access capital, understanding our procurement process so that they can be vendors with the city. And I think that from the sounds of it, it sounds like you've taken into consideration all of these things and a lot of that feedback that we often get in an effort to make this program expand. So I really, really appreciate that. I very much, my question was going to be very much along the lines of how can we find a way to eliminate all of those waivers from MDEW when we're doing stuff with, procurement and purchasing through the city. I think it's an investment into our community to make sure that we're supporting our small businesses here. So I thank you for all of that. And then the only other piece that I had was, it sounds like you guys have all these really wonderful working groups in place, and I want to encourage the use of city council staff as much as possible because they are the direct link to administration for us, and they know so much about our communities already. Because of the countless hours of emails and messages and phone calls that we're constantly, all 15 of us are giving them. So they know our communities just about as great as we do. So I really encourage you, whenever possible, whether it's reviewing RFPs or whatever it might be, to really include council staff on some of this because they are a connection to everything else that's happening and all the wonderful progress that it seems to be that we're starting to do. So that's it.
Thank you. That under consideration.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much. This has been great. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I also have to mark these for the. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
No, it's okay. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Art, culture, tourism. How are you?
Counselors, and I'm sorry that Joe Wilson Jr. can't be here to, he's so much more compelling than I am, but I hope that my longevity in the department in a different way. Right?
Yeah.
We'll be able to speak.
Also
later.
compelling.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Before you start, we're going to mark, this is exhibit number 29. So,
Second.
all right, all in favor, Counselor Campbell, seconded by Counselor Sanchez, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Wonderful. Please begin.
I'm gonna let Dr. Selton explain the mission of his department.
Great.
So, if you read our mission, we have the charge of these three, art, culture, and tourism to continue developing a vibrant and creative city, integrating arts and culture and community life while showcasing ourselves as an international cultural destination. We've gone through a process over the past several years of updating our cultural plan. So we have a new cultural plan this year that we just launched. We're super excited about it. Equity is at the heart of it. It was developed during the pandemic through a really robust community process. I would love to talk to all of you about it in the future, but that's really at the core of, we see our budget as a moral document. It is in service of the priorities of the community. That cultural plan is our North Star. It has 7 thematic areas. It has measurable outcomes. It has a lot of other stakeholders who are holding, the charge together. But we do have the work we do in public art. We manage 2 commissions, the Arts We Like Commission and the Special Committee for Commemorative Works, both of which have community participation. They're not paid commissions, but they have important philosophical work that they do. We support a lot of work that goes on in the city in terms of citizen organizers who produce events through our city service initiative. So every Wednesday at 10 a.m., we are managing a group of citizen stakeholders who are coming to try to put together plans to have safe, economically viable cultural events in our city. And so we do that kind of transactional work, and then we do the stuff around policy, And we, we joke that we say we throw parties, but we do, it's important economic development work to do events like PDD Fest as well. So that's just the kind of like top level, and I really appreciate any questions you might have.
Thank you so much.
Thank
That's
you.
an excellent introduction. All right. Now we have the director.
Moving on to the budget numbers, if you're following along in your budget book, we're on page 81. Art, culture, and tourism is a revenue generating department, and total revenue in fiscal 24 is closed at $136,700. This is an increase of $200 over fiscal 23 budget. Moving on to expenditures, salaries, total salaries for fiscal 24 are proposed $418,071, an increase of $20,439 over the 23 budget. The department has requested the following organizational changes. They would like to fund an ACT coordinator for $47,220, limited to grant funding, so there's no general fund budget effect. They'd like to fund a production coordinator for $52,809, also limited to grant funding, so zero budget effect. And they'd like to change the title on compensation for project manager ACT at an A13 to a director of special projects in A15, and total cost of that is $575. And moving on to benefits for fiscal 24, they are proposed at $260,618, a decrease of $3,808 from the 23 budget. Total services in fiscal 24 are proposed at $1,064,990. This is a decrease of $10,112 from the 23 budget. And this is primarily due to reductions in advertising and marketing and contractual services based on trend. Additionally, rentals not classified was reduced and funding was added to the food line item under the supplies section of the budget. Total supplies fiscal year 24 are proposed at $15,200, an increase of $4,500 over the 23 budget. And this increase is due to that reallocation of food related expenditures. And there's no capital budget in this department. That's all for the questions.
I just have a quick question on the grant funding. How long is the grant? How long will that funding be available?
So ARPA through, the FY20 or the 2026 horizon, but we are actively seeking a lot of funding to support those positions, and we're confident that we'll be able to support.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor.
Thanks, and these are quick. Well, first, thank you so much, and I've really enjoyed working with you and Director Wilson so far. You guys have been so responsive, and I just think arts and culture is one of the things that really defines Providence, and so having you guys supporting that so well is really great. My two quick questions. What is the food expense line? What do you guys buy food for?
Well, so a lot of times when we have really hard conversations with community-based
Okay,
organizations,
so it's for that.
it's really to feed people so that they get along better. It's
Yeah,
you bring bread, it's a different vibe.
Yeah, okay, that makes so sense.
No.
Yeah. Nobody works for it.
We already-
And then, why is there a decrease of 50% in the advertising and marketing line?
I'm not super detailed with the previous budgets, but I think we just found that we weren't spending that money and it wasn't serving us to keep the money in that line. So it was a matter of saying what are we actually doing with the resources?
Okay.
We don't really, things that look like advertising in our work are actually grants that we give organizations to do work. And
Yeah.
sometimes they're like, we'll put an ad in your program guide, but it's not really advertising per se.
Okay,
Is that, yeah.
Yeah, and we work with organizations that are promoting Providence, so.
yeah, so it's not. Okay, thank you, that's helpful. Those are my other questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman. First question, can we get an org chart for this department when you get a chance?
I have right now.
Let's see.
Yeah, it was included in the, happy to provide another one. Okay,
No, it's not stapled
no, it's just not stapled in, but if you want to pass those, this is the.
Thank you. Any answers?
Pardon?
Because there's gonna be-
Oh, I'm sorry. Madam Clerk, do we need to, can we include this in exhibit number 20?
Yes, we can,
8? No?
no, we're on 29,
Yes.
we're on 29, yes.
So back to my question about nightlife vision. I think that's somewhere where the city is, not doing a very good job in, everyone. I think it's something that we can be doing a lot better job, not only in the vibe and the vision, but I think it would help with some of the nuances that come with nightlife. There's some cities, I know Boston has a nightlife director, coordinator. I think that's something that we desperately need here in Providence or something along those lines. Just for example, tomorrow we have Mr. Worldwide coming to Providence and the city should be involved in something like that. Hippo.
You got a line,
You
can
need to
you
know.
hook us up? I mean, yeah,
No, but
I'm with you.
we're-
Yeah, well, we are, yeah. No, we are currently in the discovery phase of our Life at Night economic impact study, and I
Right.
think, I have like a scholarly hat as well, and I've done research on Chicago's nightlife cultures and
Mhm.
why house music, for example, emerges in a place like Chicago, and what is our contribution going to be culturally. We have to understand both the economic impacts and the cultural impacts. Those things go hand in hand. So we're in the discovery phase with a really great bilingual survey tool, and then also focus groups that are just being organized by a subcontractor with John Stover and Associates out of DC, named Manuel Cordero, who you all may know from Civic Studio. So we're really excited about getting some hard data to show what we're already doing, and that's going to enable us to plan for the future. Do we need the position of a czar or a director to really oversee those relationships? How do we get out of the mindset of like nightlife is a nuisance to nightlife is an asset to what we do, and it's important to the cultural fabric of our city. So we're with you on that, and if you'd like to be involved more in the study, in a focus group per se, like
What's the timeline on that study?
we're gonna be completing it about a year from now.
So we will send you, we will send you a link to the survey. We'd love you to distribute it as far as wide as possible. It's primarily targeting anyone who has, and we're defining nightlife. So, and we would also love your inputs on what you think is working in your neighborhoods and what's not, and where you think we can improve, because we want nightlife to thrive. We don't want it to have to shut it down because of issues. And if you have any cultural assets or anything that you think we should be activating better, we would love to know.
May I just interrupt and ask a follow-up question on that?
Sure.
How are you going to be coordinating with the Board of Licenses?
They're involved directly with us, so they've provided us with a list of all the license holders, and those are the people we're reaching out to first and foremost. So if it doesn't hurt to reinforce the message that, ACT is doing this, it's legitimate, we want you to participate, but we have BOL directly involved.
I'm just going to say that, the communities that surround some of those clubs and nightclubs are going to have a lot to say, and I don't know how you can reach out to those people
Right.
also about what's working, what isn't, with regard to the people that hold the licenses.
Right, so focus groups will include membership from all the neighborhood organizations, and you're welcome to recommend anybody and everybody that should be in a focus group. That's a really important role that the council can play.
I also think, I was just gonna mention, there's another part that's coming that we can talk about with the IS as well.
Okay, great. Okay. I'm sorry, Councilor Sanchez.
Yeah,
are you finished?
that was mostly my question. My only other slight question was, in terms of, PVD Fest, I think that's something that kind of shook a lot of, Providence residents, around my age at least, that it getting moved. The mayor's main message around it was, Providence students, college students, would be able to participate. But the counter argument that I'm hearing from a lot of people, is Providence residents that go to school in other places, it affects them. So I mean, I don't know what was the surrounding conversations in making that decision happening?
Yeah, so
Any more?
we've been working for years with our city service partners in Police, Fire, and FEMA to make PDD Fest safe and functional for our city. It is really, really difficult for them in the midst of all that happens this time of year to come on in the way they need to between all the graduations and Pride. That is a primary reason that we've been thinking about moving to the fall. And we're going to try it this year, right? It's a pilot. Like maybe it isn't the right choice, but I think the gridlock of the city shutting down RIPTA, there's a lot of reasons that it's very challenging to do it the way we've done it. And there are all kinds of new condo buildings online downtown that there weren't in 2015 when we started producing this festival as the International Arts Fest, which is its like previous incarnation, or even Sound Session at Black Rep, if some of you remember that, which I worked on as an employee of that organization. So it's a work in progress, but we're not going to lose the soul of the project. It's in the DNA of the department, and we're committed to making it first and foremost a thing that serves our local artist community and represents us to ourselves. So that's not going to go away. But your point is taken that young people that go out of town are going to maybe miss that in a way that they might not otherwise. So that's a great thing.
Is there I don't know the details, but is there questions or was there a decision made around the funding for PVD Fest? Was it like reduced by a large amount? I think my memory is correct.
You can see in our budget that we're actually reducing from 1.2 million to over 700,000 this year. And we're changing a lot of things about the festival, and that's part of that.
But it wouldn't be in this package, though.
It's, you see the PVD Fest line item in our general fund, which is a tiny fraction of that funding, right? So we are trying it at a different scale, but it's not a major impact on how the city funds the project.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Councilor Turner.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you for the work that you and Sally, right? Did on really getting the departments together and also regarding events in the community and understanding that we as a city council person need to know what's happening in our district, right? Not just only downtown, but just really in the community. And does it match that? Is it coordinated? Post celebration, I think that those are the things. I've had a lens of a user in downtown as a partier, and also like Black Fest and all the celebration and PDD Fest, but also being on the licensing board and as a chair at one time. And I've seen the improvement, but I think we need to have more. The safety, the coordination, especially with, as I mentioned, in wards of things that are happening. Sometimes we don't know what's happening, and all of a sudden something happens drastically, and we get the phone calls. So I urge economic development with arts and culture to really talk more and coordinate, and even with us, because I think we can provide some insight because we know the neighborhoods. I would suggest that you keep the $10,000 in the budget. That I will put it back. The reason why, a couple of things. One is, I don't know if Arts and Cultural supports this or not. Whoever does creates the map of the city of Providence, and many of our neighborhoods are not there. Right? And that's that map that shows downtown Providence, or like you go from downtown to Roger Lewis Park.
Right. Right. It's like a
There's nothing belongs there.
Right.
Down in Ward 14, you go there and it's like blank. So somehow advertising, the other advertising piece is that in the local newspapers, right? Things that are happening in downtown or our communities don't know. So somehow economic development again, with arts and culture and tourism, we're disconnected. You go to downtown, and PDD is the most diverse people of color, right? That I've seen over time. I mean, we need to have more people feeling that they belong also in downtown. You go to other cities and it's the same feeling. You hardly see any people of color in downtowns, whether they're living or celebrating. That's not the future that we want, and that's what I've seen. The other is, in terms of talking to people and so forth, Mr. Santuri, who's the club, organizer for,
Owner of the Coliseum.
Coliseum, but he's also has a group. I think he's a key person to really, have the nightlife. He understands that he's been living here.
He's part of the PBD Fest team.
Yeah, but I think overall and broad, because, you know, the feeling over the years, and I'll share this with them, is that as people have been moving back to downtown, you know, they want peace and quiet. And I would say, even when I served in the Senate, people would say, well, how can we attract the young people? Well, if we don't have a nightlife, you can't attract young people, you can't attract the talented IT or whomever it is. And so when people have moved to downtown, they want it to be like the suburbia. I mean, right? Very peace and quiet. The reality is that people want to enjoy themselves. So it's a balance, and I think that we have to figure that out. So an investment of our dollars should be in this area, right? But also in the community, because we're not there. We're making some improvement, and I think that we need more, not just even 5% to see that, whether it's advertising and or connecting with theater and film. On the east side, we have now the film that's being
Good burger.
Good Burger.
Yeah.
I see the movie. How is the city in your area talking to the film industry at the state level? And how do we support that? Whether it's Mr. Worldwide, providing him with a citation or the key to the city. I mean, this guy is motivation. So I would say that you know, this is an area that I'm passionate about, you know, and I can see how, you know, we can tie the communities to downtown and to the arts and culture. Obviously, I think that within your budget, public safety needs to be embedded in with the Providence police and licensing. Because at times, you know, people don't feel safe when these events take place and so forth. So with that said, I wanted to ask you questions. One is, you have a grant writer, and I see a line item that it says grant expenditure. Of
Grant
160
expenditures.
Huh?
Grant expenditures,
Yes.
160.
165? Is that,
Oh, yes. So these are grants we make to community-based organizations. So in all 15 wards, in all 25 neighborhoods, we make mostly between $500 and $4,000 grants. And that's twice a year we make those grants. So that's something that you all can help us get the word out about. But we usually make about 90% of the grants that are asked, and it's a pretty simple, accessible process. So that's our grant funding line for project.
but you don't have a grant writer?
Well, so we also, I don't know if you all have our current grants that we have this sheet. Maybe.
Yeah.
So we do write grants to external funders, both state, national, you know, so we've had a lot of luck with the NEA bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars to support projects like PBD Fest. We have a current project that I think we talked about, Councilman, a little bit on Broad Street, the project Downtown Design, Broad Street Stories. That's being funded by a blend of National Historic Trust money and state placemaking commerce money. So those are things that we bring in external funds to stand up. So we're always seeking external funds to support the core functions of the department. I hope to, in a month, be able to share a really exciting, big opportunity that we've been working on with you all. So that will be focused on new opportunities in art and neighborhoods.
And I hope you take into consideration that conversation regarding that map.
Yeah, I mean, I know what the map you're talking about, and it would be awesome to have a new.
I'm
one.
sure that the new people that have come to the city and they pick up that map, it's like, where's the neighborhoods?
Yeah, that map is-
And I get it, it's about, highlighting, visiting places, but hey,
So we're working
You got
closely
it.
with our partners, one of whom's responsible for like bringing in those maps to do a kind of downtown to other neighborhoods strategy.
Okay.
I mean, that's part of the tourism, which we haven't talked about as much, because a lot of that's getting developed, but really making sure that, yeah, we're promoting our downtown, but we're also doing wayfinding and marketing our neighborhoods as well.
Let's have four Peter.
Mine is very quick. I think it is. Just to follow up on some of the grant question he was asking. If I'm not mistaken, Arts, Culture, and Tourism managed the Eli grant, correct?
With parks.
With parks, okay, because I had friends groups from my ward ask me, why is Parks doing it when they've only had dealt with Arts, ACT for the longest time. So I didn't know if it was moved over for any specific reason or.
The Eli money is dispersed to the Parks Department, and we then share in the administration of it. There's been a rethinking, that wasn't my rethinking, but I think before the new administration came on, about how that would be managed. But it is still administered through our department. So if your constituents are looking, it's on our culturetourism.com, like grant opportunity. And we are still involved, so don't worry, it's gonna be.
But Parks will receive, like, they're the ones that vet the grant process, or is it still a combination of?
It's still a combination. It's just a little less a part of the workflow of the P3 organization, the nonprofit partner that was working with parks. I think, yeah, we've restructured it a little bit. It
Is
should
there
function
any
the same.
particular reason why the restructure happened?
There was some fiscal mismanagement this past year that hurt our department's bottom line. And so I think there was a little bit of a come to whoever you believe in conversation about how to make that a little tighter.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Well, I have to thank you so much, Stephanie. Your organization is doing very important work. You really do that work. Thank you very much for all you do.
It's really a pleasure to serve the city and to work with you all. So let's not be strangers. I know I have the emails of most of you and the staff, so we'll continue to work closely.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
We'll follow back up with you on that.
Okay, for that. Oh, yeah. For Mr. Morris and waiting. And Deputy Chief Mahoney is also there. So we're gonna have to show you right up. We appreciate your patience. We did. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, he doesn't see the breath of all the.
That's right, now he knows more.
Yeah.
So, did you do the very song?
Yeah.
So now I'm going to start by marking this presentation as exhibit number 30.
Oh, so moved. Thank you.
All right, motion made by Councilor Anderson, seconded by Councilor Charter, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. Wonderful. So nice to see you again. I don't know if you already gave your narrative.
Yeah,
or you
I got
have
the
a narrative, or how you want to pick this off, because.
I'm one of the fewest departments that brings money into the government.
Okay.
That is definitely known across the United States. The key to that is how we manage that, how we are good stewards of that. So those are Deputy Director Mahoney and I have had conversations on where our funds we believe we want to go. You'll notice in the upcoming org chart, no changes were made. And the reason being is I'm not gonna make a change just to go back and make another change. I'm gonna take this time to understand my city and my department. And then I'm gonna make one big change. And that one big change is gonna have a dramatic effect in my mind. Director Thomas is, we have talked as well, definitely in areas such as quality of life, such as graffiti, trash, stuff like that. So that's why the line items are static at this time. Then I'm gonna come back and we will have follow-up conversations when it's a very robust change. So please, please know that that's why we will not be asking for any deviations from this budget.
All right. Yes, we're.
Let's start with the line. We are on page 67 of the budget book. This is a revenue generating department. Fiscal 24 proposed revenue budget is $7,028,000. This is a decrease of $1,315,000 from the 23 budget. And this is just based on trend in the construction market and no number of projects. As the director mentioned, there is no requested organizational changes, and total salaries is budgeted at $792,202, an increase of $69,059 over the 23 budget. And that increase is due to the 2.75% cost of living adjustment and staff increases. Moving on to benefits, total benefits in fiscal 24 are proposed at $581,279,000, an increase of $19,968 over the 23 budget. Total services for fiscal 24 are proposed at $494,713,000, an increase of $14,579 over the 23 budget. And this is primarily due to the contractual increase in rent for 44 Westminster. Supplies is budgeted at $2,500, which is consistent with the 23 budget. There's no capital expense for this department. And this is the only division of DIS that has any operating expenses outside of salaries and benefits. I don't know if you'd like me to read through all of the other divisions salary line items, but there's no organizational changes.
Well, I would agree with if we just stop and go on to the next. Not sure we need to go on to the next, because we have them all, and maybe we can just open it up for questions. Okay, so who wants to kick it off? Go ahead, Councilor Pichardo.
Thank you. What is the reason why there's a decrease of 1.3 million on the revenue side?
That's based off of construction. It's also based off of a fee structure that was put in place in 2018 by the state, coming out of a 2005 class action lawsuit regarding building permit fees. I'm working with Director Thomas and Chief Hawkins and Deputy Director Mahoney, and we're going through our fee structure because there is avenue to go back to the state and challenge that imposed fee structure. So we're going to take a look at that. Also, we're going to reduce areas where we don't need to spend money. This is my notebook. There's 18 notebooks in this notebook. And that's what we're gonna move for. We're gonna move to leverage what we have and what we can use to reduce the overhead. And then we need to look at, are we collecting enough fees? Are we collecting enough fees in the right area? Do we have contractors that are going out and doing work without permit because they don't know, or are they doing work without permit because they're gonna try to get away with it? That's where we need to look at our fee structure and how best we can serve our community.
On that. And then I didn't realize, so did you say there was an fee structure imposed by the state in 2005? Is that what you said?
The class action happened in 2005, brought by and I met with them this morning. Director Thomas and I met with the Rhode Island Builders Association this morning, and they discussed it. And so I did my more research. I knew the fee structure was there. What they've done is created a formula. I don't know the calculations on the formula. I don't know the basis of the formula. There's a formula for every city on their permit fees and how they impose them and the cost. So I have questions on that because I come from a cost recovery where we did it down to the 0.07 of an hour analysis of what it costs us to do business. Not what it costs the community, but what it costs us to do business and how we facilitate that. From in that area, it was from long range planning all the way down to an approach permit, things of that nature. And so we're looking at that against what the state has imposed to see where, one, we can save people money, and two, where we can come clean, basically balance the budget on what we charge to what we spend.
I'm sorry, Councilor Pacheco.
No, that's great. Well, jump in. There was a line here that says contractors. Private contractors, 150,000. You, just,
Yes, so this department is charged with compliance, boarding up unsafe structures. So those contractors go and board up or fence or remove debris, things of that nature. So we have a 150,000, and then they take out of that, they do the, what's what we call it? Incumbents, I believe.
Incumbents.
Yes. Bear with me. So they take out of that to take care of those items. We have emergency situations. If there's a fire, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna get a hold of that company, whatever company it is, and they're gonna come and secure that property. So that's what that 150,000 is going for at this time.
Okay, yes, Councilor Annabelle.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman, and thank you. I asked both my questions earlier, so just a few. You mentioned in your opening that you'll use the next bit of time to see how things are working and propose a big change. Is that the next fiscal year, or when are you expected to come back with that big change? And apologies if I missed it while I raised the question.
I'm very aggressive. And so I really want to go back to Director Thomas and Chief Hopkins with Deputy Director Mahoney and get those changes in place as soon as I can.
Okay, so not waiting a fiscal year.
Yeah, I want a solid plan, so that way, one, I have a direct business model that I can demonstrate through numbers of why. I can demonstrate through numbers over the last several years, the trends of why and where I need the people and where I don't need people.
Yeah.
And so those are the changes I'm looking to make.
Okay, great. Is it okay with that?
Yes,
Okay. When we heard from DPW, we heard that for their fines and fees, we collect about 20% of those fines and fees for your department. One, sorry to list it. Are you collecting fines and fees? And if so, like, how are you at getting actually collecting them? Oh, yeah, thank you, Jeff. Yeah,
Fines, you say?
yeah, fines and fees, like for DPW, we're only collecting like 20% of our fines and fees.
So, part of that 150,000 is 50,000 or so put out there for title searches. So we found in the past that our notices of violation didn't have much of an effect on people. And so we determined that maybe what we should start to do is to serve the financial institutions that are loaning money. And so if we are issuing a violation against somebody, we will also issue a violation against anybody who has a financial interest in the property.
Oh, interesting.
By Rhode Island law is responsible for maintaining that property as the owner is.
Okay.
So we're doing that and kind of dancing the fine line of understanding during this time there's real problems with people being able to fix their own homes and difficulty in that. So we work with people constantly, daily, probably 10 meetings a day, quick ones, to discuss people that can't afford to do what needs to be done to correct the problem that we pointed out to them.
Okay. And when folks come back to you, like let's say you inspect someone's home and you find something deficient and you serve them some sort of notification. I understand like a lien goes on their home in some instances. If someone has, I think we're meeting soon, so I've been thinking on this with a specific example, but if someone, my brain is like stopping. If someone wants to dispute that, what is the process and how often are those heard by whatever commission is overseeing that?
We've been discussing that about, there really hasn't been a formal group that someone appeals to. What happens most of the time with violations is there's one of two things. They appeal it saying that the problem doesn't exist anymore, of which we'll just go re-inspect it.
Do you send the same inspectors?
I
Like
don't
if they got
send the
inspected by person A, do you send person A back or do you send someone else?
It's always the same inspector unless it becomes a court case, and then we have one person assigned to all the court cases, and they do those inspections. Very hesitant when someone calls us up and says, hey, I have this inspector go out there, and I want another inspector.
Yeah.
You know, we could do that all day long with people. I sometimes will send another person out with the original inspector. If someone comes to me and tells me they're having a problem with that inspector, for whatever the reason will be, I certainly would get involved and send somebody else out to look at that property.
Okay, thank you. And then the only other question I had was there's a section here about, sorry. We have a plumbing, drainage and gas piping section. What does the gas piping section do? Like, is that just inspecting people? I'm just not asking the question, just ask what it is. Yeah. What's that division?
So that piece is exactly it. It's the plumbing permits, the gas piping permits. Also, we do licensing for boiler installers, refrigeration installation. So that's what those line items.
Okay, so it says people are like repairing or installing your equipment or.
Yeah, swap out of your boilers, your
Okay.
furnaces, your stoves, things of that nature.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, all right. Yes. Madam.
Just for there's many new members here. So the violations actually get put into a separate fund, revolving fund for inspections and standards. And I think it was under the deputy's direction that it was put in the general fund. And by law, it has to go into a revolving fund and be used for, I'll let you take over, and the challenges that you have trying to spend it down.
I think that the home repair funds that the city has and works with now are great. But I feel very strongly that when someone goes to them for money, for assistance, they do a credit check and they look at their income. I think that what we want to do is to do the exact opposite. You shouldn't have any good credit, and your income shouldn't be to the level where you're able to get money to abate your violations. And those are the people that we want to help with the money that we have in the revolving fund, which now is about 1.4 million.
Oh, wow.
And so we put out for RFP for someone to manage that for us. If someone came to us and said, hey, I can't afford, I feel like if the cop who tells you that their brother's a lawyer and call him, he can help you out with the ticket I just gave you. We can't be involved in that. So we did put our Providence revolving, coincidentally, nothing to do, I've always said it's the Providence revolving fund, that's the name of their organization. They do that, they do it well, and they're gonna do it for us. The applications will go to them. We literally have 2 that are about to be approved for assistance, be it a forgivable loan, 5-year forgivable loan, or a low interest loan, or whatever is determined that they can afford to do.
Awesome, agree.
We, to piggyback on what Deputy Mahoney is saying is that, so through budgeting, they've taken a portion of that and invested it, so that way we're making money off of that piece, so we can put it back in there. So it's not just sitting stagnant. I think it's 660,000, give or take. The program pulls in through violations about 68,000 a year. The 2 homes that Director Mahoney was talking about, if they go through the approval process, we will have 2 revitalized homes within a couple of months.
Thanks.
So what that does for the neighborhood.
Yeah, it's huge.
So we are leveraging what we can to keep that fund alive, because it goes back automatically. If there are other outliers where they cannot get through this process, Providence Revolving also does the 3.5 interest rate, or they get grants for forgivable loans, but the 95, 95.5% on the grant responsibilities. So those are things that Deputy Director Mahoney's taken to heart, and we'll push him forward with that.
So how do we direct people to that program? So if they are invited, like if they have some sort of compliance issue and they haven't found out yet, or they just want to be proactive, how do we help them find you?
We don't want people directed to that,
Okay.
because we want to use that for people that we
That
take
use
brought
that.
into the system, and we're running through legal, and they're like, listen, I got enough money to put gas in my car.
Yeah.
And we're like, all right, stop, I'll stop.
Okay.
And our legal team is analyzing that with Director Mahoney and making sure that we get them over to this program. It used to be called the Every Home Program or something of that nature, where Director Thomas and everyone were looking at not using that nomenclature. We're gonna find something else, or we're just gonna have it part of our policy.
Okay, thank you.
I could add on that too, if you don't mind. We probably since this started collecting fine money, which is what, 9 years ago, we probably collected over $3 million. And that first $1.6 million did go into the general fund, which stopped, I don't know how many years ago, a few years ago, it was stopped. It's now 1.4 million. I remember Mayor Laws was saying to me, how are you going to gauge success on this program? In 1 year, we collected $510,000 in civil fines. I said, the success is going to be when we realize that we're collecting 50,000 and not 500,000, because then people are abating the violations of doing. The other thing I'll tell you just quickly is that of the $3 million, I would bet you that no more than 15,000 of 3 million came from owner-occupied homes. It comes from out-of-state LLCs. It comes from banks that have had properties sitting for 3 years and haven't done anything with them.
Yeah.
And those are the people that we've collected this money from. And 99.7% of the time when someone comes in that's an owner-occupied and they meet with me about the fines, I don't tend to ever find them.
Thank you.
Great. Councilor Pacheco.
Thank you for following up on that. That's at least one of the good things that former mayor, when he was a housing judge, I guess he held the landlords or at least the banks to their feet. But I also wanted to, that's a great program, and we'll definitely reach out if there are other, as we're walking our district and see someone that's really in need. But I also wanted to just highlight this in the sense that, as you indicated, people are hurting and they're gonna hurt more. Recession is in, and when there's this disconnect, right? So if we can, one of your charges, I'm sure you probably thought about this, is that comprehensively, if we can develop a program that is supporting these families or homeowners to really airtight their home, insulation, everything else with the energy audits and all that, coordinating those kind of things, because it's just becoming very impossible to meet these homes, right? Especially with large homes. So I think if we can start thinking more in that line of more comprehensively how to develop a program that we can tap into other dollars and HUD money and so forth, and direct it to these families to reduce their cost of heating, electricity, et cetera.
Absolutely, absolutely. I sat on a board that created a joint municipal agreement to model homes, and what that is taking all the energy usage of the home and the energy how it expresses it through the building. And so there's a third-party company that I work with out there, phenomenal company, works with the state and uses the grants money and goes and models someone's home and says, this is where you're losing your energy, or this is where this is happening. You make these 3 changes and you're saving so much on your heating bill or AC bill or whatever.
Questions?
Comment.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Sanchez.
I'm so sad that I haven't got a chance to meet you, Director. I mean, I honestly don't have any questions. I'm really excited. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what you're gonna do. This is a department that is crucial to the city being equitable, just city, and I'm excited to work with you. If you need anything from us, please reach out.
I appreciate it, I really do. One thing is that in the beginning here, it's gonna be a little bit slow, but when the changes happen, then you're gonna hear from your constituents, the citizens. You're gonna hear. You will hear. I always tell people, I don't have a stop button and I don't fail. Those are two things I never do. So, my task at hand is to provide a department that responds correctly and timely. That's number one. Number two is moving forward with programs that Deputy Director Mahoney is working on, because it's a symbiotic circle and we're all involved. No matter what level, we're all involved in this community. And so if we can take these fees that we're collecting from fines and put it back into the community to people that are underserved, we have to really look at that. We're also looking at aging in place type programs. Director Thomas is really focused on that piece. I think we talk about that regularly. Also the quality of life, the graffiti chair that group with the other directors where we're gonna take next level, and how do we stop the recurring offenses? So ACT is gonna be involved in that for the long-term social aspect. I use this analogy, and I showed it to Director Thomas this morning. Coming down Washington, right off the service road, bear with me, I've only been here 5 weeks. There's a chicken, a rooster painted on an electrical box. There is no graffiti on that rooster.
Yeah.
Why? Because that rooster is part of a culture. My wife's Portuguese, right? So there's roosters and Mary and things, right? And what I'm saying is, on the side of that electrical box, there's a silver meter box. That thing has graffiti all over it, but not that rooster.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at is how can we implement that into hotspots that are getting graffiti? How can we do that? That's the long-term piece. Right now, we're just addressing the immediate, and we're looking at the long-term piece. So those are my
Aspirations.
Then I'm going to ask a few questions, because I still have a few questions. Okay, this is very fast, but just want to agree with that, and like a good example of that too is the Sandwich Hut on North Main Street. They had some local kids or youth paint graffiti in their parking lot that's beautiful and culturally appropriate, doesn't get graffiti, like, they don't get tagged. Because the community made the graffiti, so, and they made this beautiful art, so just wanted to share that other example. And also, if you haven't tried the Sandwich Hut yet, North Main at 8th Street. It's
It's
75th year.
All right.
Yeah, you know.
So if you could bear with me on your org chart, you just needed to go through your unfilled positions and what your plans are with regard to those, because as you know, our job is to ask you those questions to see whether you really need those and what your plans are.
I absolutely need those, but I might not need those in that exact role. I'd rather repurpose those funds and other positions that can directly help the community. So that's part of this big robust change. I'm asking to keep those funded positions because then the overall cap of the money is there. So that way we can look at maybe different grade levels. It'd be done through, we call them MOUs, we call them MOAs.
Yeah.
We would look at doing something like that to go to rewrite some job descriptions, things of that nature. I am asking not to lose those positions.
Okay.
I had some short answers, yes.
Okay, all right, just I needed to ask the question, and, Madam Auditor, did you have any questions, more questions? Okay. I think we've asked our questions.
Nice.
We're very excited to work with, obviously, we're very excited about this
So,
If I could just throw out there too, and by the way, I'm, in 12 years, I'm as excited as ever because of the director, I really am. And I think we're going in the right direction. A big concern is the 1.4 million won't last long. And if this program is really successful and helps the people that it should help, we gotta figure out a way that we can continue helping. And it's not gonna be through fines because we're not generating enough of that.
And go ahead.
Just to get into the ARPA thing, the $3 million, could we put that in that?
Yeah.
It's being, all the arguments are still being.
Well, with all due respect, the council has the last say.
That's
Sorry.
under review.
If we were able to do that, we'd be able
It's
to
an
put
option.
the 1.4 million back into a deposit, to earn some interest on it, and then use those funds, which do have a time limit.
We're reviewing it. And we'll look at the different priorities.
Okay. I'd also like to thank you, Deputy Director, for all your service to the city. You're doing a great job. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we have to do a motion to continue.
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion made by Councilor Sanchez, second. Councilor Vanderpump, seconded by. All in favor?
Aye.
Gina?
All opposed? And a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Next one, we can.
Councilor Carro, seconded by Councilor Paul. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
So who moved the adjourn?
Councilor.
I move.
Pachado. Pachado.
so I'll put you.
I moved before I came, so that I.
Thank you for letting me know that.